You know, usually when we pick up a piece of legislation, the instinct is to run in the other direction. It feels like we're about to wade through a swamp of legalese.
It does. Latin terms, boredom, the whole package.
But today, the document in our stack isn't just dry text. It is, and I don't think this is an exaggeration, effectively the operating system for the entire Indian economy.
It really is.
Right.
It's the rule book that defines the relationship between, well, every single person who hires and every single person who works in India.
We are looking at the Industrial Relations Code
Right.
2020. And honestly, when I first saw the title, I thought, okay, administrative update.
Right.
But then I started reading the source notes, specifically Act number 35 of 2020. And I realized this isn't just an update. This is a rewrite of the physics of the workplace.
That is a great way to frame it. This code is a massive consolidation effort. The government essentially took a stack of old laws about trade unions, conditions of employment, how arguments get settled.
And just melted them down into one single streamlined framework. And what's the stated mission here? Because usually when laws get streamlined, someone wins and someone, loses.
The stated goal is to balance the rights of workers with the ease of doing business.
Right.
It's trying to modernize the Indian labor market.
Right.
But as we go through this, you're going to see that modernizing involves some very specific and frankly surprising changes to the definitions of things we think we understand.
Like what?
We're talking about how disputes get handled, how unions actually get recognized, and my personal favorite, redefining what a strike actually is.
Okay, let's jump right into those definitions. Because in law, if you don't fit the definition, you don't get the protection. The most basic unit is the worker. I feel like I know what a worker is.
Somebody who works, right.
Yeah, but does the code agree with me?
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
This is where we have to look closely at Section 2, Zern. The code draws a circle, and it's a pretty broad circle, at least initially.
Okay.
It includes anyone employed in an industry to do manual, unskilled, skilled, technical, operational, clerical, or supervisory work.
Okay, that sounds like almost everyone who isn't, like, the owner of the company.
Almost. But the exclusions are where the teeth are. Obviously, anyone subject to the Air Force, Army, or Navy Acts is out.
Standard stuff.
Police and prison staff are out. That's standard for national security. But then, it explicitly excludes anyone employed mainly in a managerial or administrative capacity.
So if I have manager in my title, I'm out. I'm on my own.
Likely, yes. You aren't a worker under this specific law. But here is the nuance that catches people off guard. Let's say you are in a supervisory capacity.
Right, like a shift lead or a floor supervisor. Not upper management, but you manage a team.
Exactly. Under Section 2, you are considered a worker and thus protected by this code only if you earn up to a certain amount. There is a salary cap on being a worker.
Really? What's the number?
18,000 rupees per month.
Wow.
If you draw wages exceeding 18,000 rupees per month, you are legally excluded from the definition of worker under this specific code.
Wait, let's unpack this. 18,000 rupees isn't a massive executive salary. So if I'm a supervisor making, say, 17,900, I'm a worker with all these rights.
Correct.
But if I get a small raise to 18,001, I suddenly vanish from the legal definition.
Precisely. You shift categories. You might still be an employee, which is a broader term under Section 2L, but you lose the specific shield that Section 2 gives to a worker.
That creates a fascinating and maybe slightly perverse incentive structure, doesn't it?
It's a distinct possibility. You could technically give someone a tiny raise just to bump them out of that classification. It draws a very hard line in the sand.
Speaking of gray areas, let's talk about the gig economy, contract work, freelance, temps. Does this code acknowledge that the world isn't just full of permanent 9-to-5 employees anymore?
It does, and this is actually one of the major modernization points. Section 2A explicitly introduces fixed-term employment.
Okay, so that's basically formalizing contract labor.
It is, but with a twist. Historically, in many sectors, contract labor was used as a cost-cutting measure. You hire a contractor specifically to avoid paying the benefits permanent staff get.
Right.
The code tries to plug that loophole. There's a proviso, a condition attached to Section 2O. It mandates that fixed-term workers must receive the same hours of work, wages, and allowances as a permanent worker doing the same work.
Oh, that's significant. So I can't hire you for 6 months just to pay you half price.
No, parity is required by law. And here is the real aha moment for this section. It's about gratuity.
Gratuity. That's the lump sum you get when you leave, right? But you usually have to work, 5 years for that?
Correct. That's the golden handcuff. But under this code, a fixed-term worker is eligible for gratuity if they render service under the contract for just 1 year.
1 year. Wow, that is a massive shift. It seems like the law is trying to make flexibility less exploitative.
That's the legislative intent, certainly. It's adapting to a high-churn market.
All right, let's pivot to the more dramatic stuff. Conflict. When I think of a strike, I have a very specific image in my head. People with placards, chanting, a physical act.
That is the traditional image. But Section 2, 6K of the code updates the definition of strike to catch up with modern tactics. It now specifically includes concerted casual leave.
Concerted casual leave. That sounds like, what, everyone calling in sick on the same day?
Exactly. Imagine a WhatsApp group where everyone agrees, hey, let's all take a personal day next Tuesday. In the past, that was a gray area. The code now has a calculator for that.
A calculator. Is there a specific number?
There is a hard number. The code says if 50% or more of the workers employed in an industry take concerted casual leave on a given day, that is legally defined as a strike.
50%. So if half the office calls in sick, the law just assumes it's a strike. And why does that matter? Why do I care if the law calls it a strike?
Because a strike comes with massive legal baggage. You have to give 14 days notice, sometimes more. If you just call in sick, but hit that 50% threshold and you haven't given notice.
You're now participating in an illegal strike.
And you can face penalties. It effectively criminalizes the soft protest, doesn't it? It brings that mass coordination under the regulatory umbrella.
Speaking of fighting by the rules, reading through the source material, it feels like the code is obsessed with keeping people out of the courtroom.
That is a very accurate assessment. The philosophy is internal resolution. First, under Section 3, we have the Works Committee.
Works Committee! Sounds a bit bureaucratic. Who needs one of those?
Any industrial establishment with 100 or more workers, it's a round table of employer and worker reps. And the law specifically says the number of worker reps can't be less than the employer reps.
So the boss can't stack the deck.
Theoretically, no. The Works Committee is meant to be preventive. Their job is to promote amity. Think of it as relationship maintenance.
But sometimes you don't want amity. Sometimes you have a specific problem you want to fix.
Right. That's where Section 4 comes in, the Grievance Redressal Committee.
This one sounds more functional. Redressal implies fixing something.
It is. And the threshold is much lower. Every establishment with just 20 or more workers must have one. Smaller body, max 10 members, but again, equal representation.
I noticed a specific detail in the notes about who sits on this committee that stood out.
Yes, this is a key progress point. The code mandates adequate representation of women workers, proportionate to their numbers in the establishment.
That feels crucial. It prevents a scenario where a woman has to take a grievance to a committee of 10 men.
Exactly. And unlike the Works Committee, this one is on the clock. Section 4.6 says they must complete proceedings within 30 days.
I love that. It puts a solve-by date on the problem.
And if they don't solve it, the worker has 60 days to file for conciliation. It's designed as a conveyor belt.
Okay, so that's individual grievances. But the big lever has always been the trade union, collective bargaining. Does the code clean that up?
It tries to use hard math to solve the chaos. First, forming a union. Section 6 says you need at least 10% of the workers, or 100 workers, whichever is less.
That seems achievable.
It is, but there's a floor. You explicitly need a minimum of 7 members. You can't just have 2 disgruntled employees declare themselves a union. But the real revolution is in how the employer interacts with these unions.
Right, because you might have 5 different unions all claiming to represent the workers. Who does management talk to?
A nightmare, previously. Section 14 of this code introduces the concept of the sole negotiating union.
The sole negotiating union sounds like something out of a fantasy novel.
It functions exactly like that. If a single registered trade union has the support of 51% or more of the workers on the muster roll, the employer must recognize it as the sole negotiating union.
That is a game changer. So if you win the majority, you take the whole pot.
In terms of negotiation power, yes. The employer stops dealing with splinter groups and negotiates with the one body that represents the majority.
I'm going to play devil's advocate. What if the workforce is fractured? What if you have 3 unions and they each have 30% support? Nobody has 51%.
No, the code anticipates that. Section 14.4 triggers Plan B. The employer has to form a negotiating council.
How does that work? Is it a coalition?
Exactly. The council is made up of reps from any union that has at least 20% support. You get one representative for every 20% block of workers you hold.
That is actually a really clever mechanic. It forces unions to have a decent base, that 20%, to get a seat at the table.
Right. If you're a tiny fringe union with 5% support, you're out of the room. It balances efficiency with representation.
It seems like efficiency is the recurring theme.
Yeah.
Let's move to the rule book itself. Every office has rules. These are called standing orders, right?
Yes. Chapter 4 covers standing orders. And this is one area where the ease of doing business aspect really shows up.
How so?
Under previous laws, you needed certified standing orders if you had 100 workers. Section 28 of this code raises that threshold significantly. You now only need them if you have 300 or more workers.
Wait, 300. So if I run a mid-sized plant with 250 people, I don't need formal certified standing orders.
You are exempt from that compulsion. The idea is to give flexibility to small and medium enterprises.
But for the worker in that 250-person plant, does that mean there are no rules? That the boss can just make it up as they go?
It creates a vulnerability. It doesn't mean no law, but the specific certified rigidity of standing orders isn't there. For the big players, the 300-plus crowd, there are model standing orders they can adopt.
That's a key detail. Now, speaking of rules and breaking them, there's a section about what happens when a worker gets suspended.
Right, a nightmare scenario for anyone living paycheck to paycheck.
A paycheck just stops.
And that is where Section 38 steps in with the subsistence allowance. It recognizes that you cannot be starved out during an investigation.
So the company has to keep paying them.
A portion, yes. Section 38 mandates that for the first 90 days of suspension, the worker receives 50% of their wages.
That keeps the lights on, at least. But we know investigations can drag on.
That's the trap the code tries to avoid. If the investigation drags on past 90 days, and this is important, if the delay isn't the worker's fault, the allowance jumps to 75% of their wages.
Oh, I see the mechanism there. It's a financial penalty on the employer for being slow.
Exactly. It starts costing you almost a full salary to keep the person not working. It puts a price tag on procrastination.
Okay, so we've tried everything internally. Nothing worked. We are at a stalemate. Who is the referee?
The code offers a few paths. First, there's voluntary arbitration under Section 42. If both sides agree in writing, they can just pick an arbitrator they trust.
That requires a lot of trust.
It does. If that trust isn't there, you end up at the industrial tribunal. And the composition of this tribunal has been updated in a very interesting way.
How so?
It used to be heavily judicial just judges. Now, the code says it consists of two members, a judicial member and an administrative member.
Who's the administrative member?
Sure.
A bureaucrat.
Someone with experience in government or labor matters. The logic is that you need someone on the bench who understands how a factory floor actually runs, not just legal theory.
That makes sense. Practicality over pure theory. But I noticed something about enforceability that made me pause. Usually when a court decides, that's the end of it.
Usually, yes. But Section 55 contains a provision that is, well, it's a bit of a trapdoor.
A trapdoor.
Section 55, 3b. It says that if the central government believes giving effect to a tribunal's award would be inexpedient on public grounds affecting national economy or social justice,
Wait, the government can just veto the court's decision.
they can reject or modify the award.
That sounds like incredible power. Public grounds affecting national economy is a phrase you could drive a truck through.
Theoretically, yes. However, there is a check on this power. Section 55.4 says that if the government pulls this lever, they must lay the order before the legislature or parliament.
So they can do it, but they have to take the political heat for it.
Correct. It's a safety valve. It's there to prevent a labor ruling from accidentally crashing a critical sector, but it's a huge power.
So if we zoom out and look at this entire code, what is the headline story here? What is the vibe?
The headline is structure. The code is trying to professionalize the chaos. It acknowledges the gig economy but regulates it. It acknowledges the power of unions but forces them to consolidate via the 51% rule. And above all, it puts clocks on everything.
Right. 30 days for grievances, 90 days for investigations.
Exactly. It feels like an attempt to make the Indian workplace less ad hoc, more follow the flow chart.
Predictability.
Precisely. Predictability is the currency here.
Yeah.
The ambiguity, the swamp we talked about at the beginning, is being drained.
Before we sign off, is there one final nugget in the source material, something that maybe suggests where the ultimate balance of power lies?
I'd point you to the interplay between Section 40 and Section 41. It's a perfect example of the yes, but nature of this code.
Break it down for me.
Section 40 says an employer has to give 21 days notice before changing conditions of service. Things like wages, shift timings. It's a shield.
Sounds protective. You can't just walk in and say, everybody works nights now.
Right. But then you turn the page to Section 41. It allows the government to exempt any establishment from this rule if applying it would cause serious repercussion on the industry, or if public interest requires it.
There's that public interest safety valve again.
It raises a provocative question for you, the listener. The code creates strict rules, but it keeps the keys to unlock those rules firmly in the hands of the government. So where's the line between economic necessity and the stability of a worker's life?
That is a fascinating tension to leave it on. The rules are tighter, but the exceptions are powerful. For everyone listening, next time you sign a contract, remember, you are looking at Act number 35 of 2020 in action.
Absolutely. Knowledge is leverage.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you on the next one.